We've all been there, awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations that never ended the way we needed them to. The ache sits quietly in the chest, not loud, but constant. We tell ourselves it's because of what they did or didn't do. But what if the real suffering begins somewhere else entirely? This isn't just another video about healing. It's a quiet rebellion against the stories we've been told about pain, identity, and what it means to be human. And hidden within ancient Buddhist wisdom, there is one thought, just one, that can sever the root of suffering, if you're willing to hear it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Because today, we're not chasing comfort, we're inviting truth. Pain doesn't begin in the heart, it begins in the mind. There's a moment, often in silence, when the ache rises. Maybe it happens at night when the noise fades and nothing is left but the quiet throb beneath the surface. Or maybe it catches us off guard, standing in line, hearing a song, rereading a message we should have deleted. Emotional pain doesn't knock, it slips in, and we often think it comes from what happened, from who left, from what was said or never said. But beneath it all, pain doesn't begin in the heart. It begins in the mind, not the rational mind, not logic, but that deeper, secret voice that whispers, "This means something about me." That is where suffering is born. The heartbreak isn't just about someone leaving, it's about the story that follows. I wasn't enough. The anger isn't just about being disrespected, it's the voice that says, I don't matter. And once that story takes root, it doesn't stay still. It branches into every corner of the self. It colors every memory, hijacks every thought, and pulls the present into the shadow of the past. We live not in what's happening, but in what we think it means. That's the mind's trick. It doesn't let pain stay pure. It personalizes it. This is the hidden engine behind our emotional exhaustion. We're not just hurt, we're narrating the hurt, reliving it, recycling it, building shrines to it in the form of identity, the abandoned one, the betrayed one, the never good enough one. And we carry it into conversations, into silence, into bed, into dreams. But Buddhism doesn't treat this as weakness. It sees it as the natural result of avidya, ignorance, not stupidity, but the fundamental misunderstanding that what we feel is who we are. The Buddha used the word upadana to describe this clinging, this sticky attachment to self. And nowhere is it stickier than in our emotional pain. A thought appears, an emotion follows, and instead of watching it like clouds passing through the sky, we hold it, grip it, wear it, and say, this is me. But is it? When a storm passes through the sky, do we call the sky broken? When a wave crashes, do we say the ocean is angry? Feelings are like weather, always changing. But somewhere along the way, many of us started believing the storm was our personality, that the passing hurt was a permanent truth. And so we suffer, not because of pain itself, but because we take it personally. If the heart could speak without words, it might say, feel me, but don't become me. But the mind interferes. It builds a wall of explanation. It tells a story with a beginning, middle, and no end. And the more we believe it, the more that pain lodges in the body. Tight shoulders, shallow breath, a quiet dread that never fully leaves. What if we've been trying too hard to heal the wrong layer? What if our suffering isn't asking to be solved, but surrendered? We aren't weak because we feel. We're exhausted because we've forgotten how to let go. And we've forgotten because no one taught us. No one showed us how to watch the pain without becoming it, to sit with it without inviting it to define us. to honor it, but not obey it. That's what we'll begin exploring next, because there is one thought, one line hidden in the ancient Dharma that when understood, not just heard, can cut straight through the noise. And for many, it's the first breath of freedom they've had in years. It doesn't erase pain, it simply untangles it from the self. And it begins like this: this is not mine, this is not me, this is not who I am. There's a hidden cost to every emotion we cling to. Not the feeling itself, but the story we wrap around it. A single heartbreak becomes, I'm unlovable. One failure turns into, I'll never succeed. The moment we feel pain, we try to explain it. We assign meaning. We turn it into a self, and that, according to the Buddha, is where the true suffering begins, not in the wound, but in the identity that grows around it. The second arrow parable from Buddhist teaching is simple but profound. The first arrow is the inevitable pain of life, a betrayal, a loss, a rejection. The second arrow is the story we tell ourselves afterward. I deserved this. I'm not enough. It always ends this way. The mind drives that second arrow in deeper than any external event ever could. When we say, I am sad, we do more than describe a passing feeling. We fuse with it, we wear it, we become it. The language of possession, my sadness, my anxiety, my trauma, cements the illusion that this pain is who we are. But what if we could unhook from that? What if, in the raw moment of pain, we could pause and remember the one liberating truth the Buddha offered? This is not mine. This is not me. This is not who I am. Not as a denial, not to bypass grief, but as a gentle severing of the thread that binds identity to experience. In Pali, the phrase is, Netam mama nesoham asmi nameso atta. It appears again and again in early Buddhist texts, reminding practitioners that every thought, every sensation, every emotion is impermanent, conditioned, and not self. It doesn't mean the pain isn't real. It means the pain isn't you. When a storm comes, the sky doesn't apologize. It doesn't say, this is my storm. It lets the clouds pass. And when we stop saying, my pain, my depression, my shame, we create the space to let those storms pass, too. There's a tenderness in this practice. It's not about escaping pain. It's about giving it a place to move through, rather than a home to stay in. The mind will still whisper, but this feels so personal. And it will, because we've spent years practicing identification, years rehearsing the same inner narratives. Undoing that conditioning takes time, presence, and gentle honesty. Sometimes it means sitting in the dark and asking, what am I holding that doesn't belong to me? A belief inherited from a parent, a voice from a broken past, an internalized shame that someone else planted. Letting go isn't about forgetting, it's about remembering what's not yours to carry. And perhaps the most radical act of healing is this: to feel deeply and let go anyway. To sit with sorrow and say, you are here, but you are not me. To hold anger and whisper, you are real, but you do not define me. To stand in the fire and still know that the flame is not your name. This is the practice of disidentification, not from life, but from the illusion that we are every wave that passes through us. It's not suppression, it's spaciousness. And in that space, we begin to discover who we are without the narrative, without the wound, the title, the mask. We begin to discover that what we truly are was never harmed to begin with, because at the center of every storm, there is stillness. And that stillness is not sadness or joy or fear. It is simply awareness, alive, present, free. There's a strange loyalty we form with our suffering, not because we enjoy it, but because it's familiar. like an old song we've memorized, even if we hate the melody. Some people hold on to pain because it's the one thing that feels consistent, predictable, safe in its misery. And so pain becomes a habit, not an event, not a passing emotion, but a default way of relating to the world. In Buddhist psychology, this pattern is called bhava tanha, the craving for becoming. Even in suffering, the ego clings to a sense of self. This is who I am. The anxious one, the rejected one, the one who always loses. We wrap ourselves in emotional narratives like second skin, and when the pain eases, we feel naked, lost. Who are we without the suffering? And so, subconsciously, we seek it again. We return to the relationship that hurts. We replay the insult. We scroll through old messages, reopening wounds like rituals. Because if we are not in pain, who are we? The mind prefers a known suffering to an unknown peace. This is not weakness, this is conditioning. The nervous system wires itself around patterns. If chaos was normal in childhood, calm feels threatening. If love was always conditional, kindness feels suspicious. And so we learn to mistrust the very things that could heal us. This is not mine. The mantra begins to do its quiet work here. When emotional exhaustion sets in, it's often not just from what's happening now, but from the weight of 1,000 recycled feelings. Old heartbreaks, unresolved guilt, ancestral grief, all carried forward like invisible baggage. And each time we say, "This is not mine," we loosen one strap. Maybe that anger doesn't belong to the moment. It belongs to an old father wound. Maybe that anxiety isn't about today. It echoes a childhood of walking on eggshells. Maybe the shame isn't personal. It was planted by a culture that profits from our self-doubt. We do not need to solve every trauma to begin releasing it. We only need to see clearly, this feeling has visited me before, and it always leaves. In Buddhist practice, mindfulness is not just noticing what we feel, but questioning it gently. Is this pain fresh, or is it inherited? Is this sadness about now, or is it a shadow of then? By creating space between stimulus and identity, we give ourselves permission to let the feeling move through us, not become us. And in time, a shift begins. We stop rehearsing pain. We stop performing the role of the one who suffers. We begin to relate to our emotions as passing weather, not permanent definitions. Just because a storm has come does not mean we are the storm. We are the sky, and the sky does not cling. There is no need to dramatize this truth, to turn it into a rigid practice. It's a soft unfolding, a returning again and again to the realization that we are not the characters our pain wrote for us. We are not the tension in our chest. We are not the echo of someone else's voice in our head. We are awareness. We are space. We are the witnessing presence that says gently, I see you, pain, but you are not mine. I welcome you, grief, but you are not me. And in that moment, something begins to dissolve. Not the memory, not the humanity, but the bondage. And what's left is freedom, quiet, humble, and true. There is a moment in deep meditation when everything falls away, thoughts, emotions, even the body. And what remains is not empty. It is presence. It is peace. It is the quiet awareness that watches without needing to react. In that space, the ancient truth arises. This is not me. It may sound simple, but this realization is the hinge between suffering and liberation. So much of our pain persists because we take it personally. The sadness doesn't just come, it becomes my sadness. The anger doesn't just pass, it becomes who I am. The anxiety wraps around the identity and whispers, this is what I am now. But no emotional state is what we are. This is the Dharma's deep radical medicine, the The self is not the pain. What we are is not the grief, but the one who knows grief is there. Not the thought, but the one aware a thought has arisen. Not the fear, but the silent witness behind the trembling. This is not me. Say it not to push pain away, but to remind the heart that it does not need to carry everything it feels. When we over-identify with our emotions, we give them power they were never meant to have. A passing storm becomes a permanent climate. A wound becomes a name. I'm broken. I'm too much. I'm never enough. But what if these were just passing clouds? What if what we really are is the sky? In Buddhist psychology, the notion of a not a non-self is not nihilism. It is compassion in its highest form. It invites us to loosen the grip on every role we think we must play. The good daughter, the perfect partner, the one who has it all together, the one who always suffers. Because even those identities, even the wounded ones, are masks. And every mask, no matter how familiar, hides the truth beneath. In the silence beneath the stories, there is someone untouched, someone who existed before the pain and will remain after the pain passes. And that someone is not the small self. It is vast, spacious, empty, and full at once. It is the part of us that cannot be bruised by words, abandoned by lovers, or defined by trauma. It watches the grief, but does not drown. It sees the rage, but does not lash out. It holds the shame with open arms and says, even this is not me. The practice is not to deny our emotions, but to cradle them without becoming them. Like a mother with a crying child, we hold the hurt, but we do not mistake the cry for the whole being. We rock it. We breathe with it. We wait for the stillness that always returns. Because all pain, no matter how deep, is impermanent. And we are not the pain. We are the impermanence. Each time we repeat the phrase, "This is not me," we carve space between the soul and the suffering, not to disown our experiences, but to remember we are not defined by them. And in that space, healing happens. Because no longer are we fused with every emotion. No longer must we collapse when the wave comes. We become the shore patient, unmoved, quietly enduring. So the next time despair grips the chest, or shame floods the face, or fear tightens the breath pause, whisper it inwardly, not with force, with reverence. This is not me. And feel the grip loosen. The world will not stop throwing storms. But we do not have to drown in each one. We are not the wave. We are the ocean. At some point in the quiet, after all the crying and breaking and aching has run its course, there comes a whisper. Not from outside, not from another person, not even from memory, but from a place deeper than thought. And it says, "This is not who I am." It is a moment of sacred rupture when the identity we've clung to so tightly begins to crack. Because so much of human pain is not just in what happens to us, but in the story we tell about who that makes us. Because I was abandoned, I am unworthy. Because I failed, I am a disappointment. Because I suffer, I must be broken. We live inside these conclusions, wear them like names, hand them down like heirlooms, and yet they are lies, not deliberate lies, not malicious, but inherited distortions shaped by trauma, repetition, and fear. The small self builds a cage and calls it truth. But the Dharma reminds us, no identity built in suffering can ever be the whole of what we are. Not the trauma story, not the guilt story, not even the spiritual story of the one who is still healing. We are more than our narratives. And healing doesn't mean rewriting the story to be prettier. It means stepping out of the story altogether. This is not who I am. Let the words ring out like a bell across the landscape of the heart. This anxiety real? Yes, but not identity. This grief heavy? Yes, but not essence. This shame-loud, yes, but not self. In Buddhist practice, this is the process of disidentification, the sacred art of remembering that no thought, no mood, no pattern has the right to define the totality of being. The mind tries to make meaning. It says, because this happened, I must be this. But being is not built from pain. It is revealed through presence. To sit in stillness and watch the suffering rise and fall, to breathe through a story without clinging to its ending, to feel an emotion and not use it as evidence of who we are. This is freedom. Because when we no longer believe every narrative, when we stop casting ourselves as the villain or the victim or the one who will never be enough, something strange and beautiful happens. We begin to exist beyond language. The need to fix ourselves softens. The urge to explain ourselves fades. The compulsion to become something dissolves. And what remains is peace. Not the peace that comes from perfecting life, but the peace that arises from no longer needing to perfect ourselves. So how do we get there? We practice, gently, often. We notice the old voice, the familiar script, and instead of arguing, we bow. Not in agreement, but in recognition. Ah, this voice again, the one that says I'm not enough. And then we breathe and whisper, this is not who I am. Not to escape reality, but to return to it. Because in reality, we are not the wound, we are the one who is healing. We are not the thought, we are the awareness. We are not the identity built in reaction to suffering, we are the stillness that remains after the storm. And when we live from this place, something opens. The body softens, the face relaxes, the story loses its teeth, and the heart remembers it was never broken, only buried. This is the power of one thought, one truth, one shift in perception. This is not me. This is not mine. This is not who I am. When that truth lands, not just in the mind, but in the marrow, the pain doesn't disappear, but it loses its grip, and in its place, a deeper self rises, one that cannot be harmed, one that has always been here, one that remembers, I was never my suffering, I was never my story, I am free. And so we close, not with a solution, but with a surrender. The path is not about erasing pain, but meeting it with gentleness. The liberation is not in fixing the mind, but in remembering the mind is not the master. May these words be a mirror, not for who we pretend to be, but for who we've always been beneath the noise. Let suffering come if it must. Let healing follow as it will. But through it all, may we remember the one truth that sets the heart free. This is not who I am.